You are staring at a plant that could power every engine you own. Your diesel truck, your gasoline car, your generator, your tractor, your lawnmower, all of them. And the Amish of Lancaster County in Pennsylvania are growing it right now, legally, on the same fields their ancestors planted 300 years ago. This plant doesn't just produce one fuel. It produces two, one for diesel engines, one for gasoline without modifying your vehicle, without special parts, without a trip to the mechanic. In 2010, the University of Connecticut proved something with a single number the oil industry would have preferred you never saw: 97%. And when you understand what that number means, you'll see exactly why this plant was made illegal in 1937. But before we get there, we need to look at a 1937 document that wiped this plant from American life for 80 years, crafted by four men whose names you already know, and consider 2,000 gas stations that vanished from the Midwest the same year the law passed. Stay with me. Even if you own a home, even if you've never planted a seed, even if your property is just a small plot, because what the Amish showed me about this plant can make sense on a single hectare with a shed and a pickup. The first time I drove through East Henfield Township, just outside Lancaster, I almost missed the sign. Henfield. I thought it was one of those old Pennsylvania names stuck in the landscape, long ignored. I drove on a bit further to meet an Amish farmer a friend had mentioned. His name was Reuben, a quiet man, eyes that spoke, words few and precise. A firm handshake, no pretense. He led me to the back of his barn, grabbed a glass jar from a shelf, and poured a liquid that looked like cooking oil into a small diesel tractor. The engine roared to life on the first try, no hesitation, no coughing, no black smoke. I watched, waiting for failure, expecting it to stall, to sputter, to reveal a trick. Nothing happened. When I asked where he bought the fuel, he looked at me as if I had asked the dumbest question in Lancaster County. Then he pointed to the field behind the barn and said, "I grew it myself." That was the moment everything changed. The plant was hemp, industrial hemp, cannabis sativa. And from the start, one thing must be clear. The confusion between hemp and marijuana wasn't accidental. It was manufactured. Industrial hemp contains less than 3% THC, the psychoactive compound. It isn't the threat propaganda made it out to be, not the cultural caricature repeated for decades. In 2018, the United States Farm Bill legalized the cultivation, processing, transport, and sale of industrial hemp. On paper, it returned hemp to the same category as corn, soy, or wheat. But for 80 years before that law, hemp was treated as a narcotic. The reason had nothing to do with getting high. It was about fuel, fiber, paper, industrial materials, agriculture, and above all, money. Once you understand what a single plant can do, you start seeing the history differently. Hemp seeds contain a substantial amount of oil. That oil can be converted through well-known chemical pathways into biodiesel. The result is a fuel that can run real-world engines, not lab engines, not experimental machines. Real engines used for decades on farms, generators, water pumps, and pickups. Rudolph Diesel did not build the diesel engine to serve oil companies. He developed it in the late 19th century and filed his patent on the 28th of February, 1892. The document was titled Theory and Construction of a Rational Thermal Engine. It was a compression ignition engine conceived to run on vegetable oils. In 1900, at the Paris World Exposition, Diesel ran one of his engines on peanut oil. The demonstration was so clean, so stable, that most of the audience didn't fully grasp what they were seeing. They weren't witnessing a curiosity. They were witnessing a historical possibility, a modern engine powered by a crop. Diesel wrote that vegetable oils could be as important as petroleum and could help agriculture thrive. He imagined a future where farmers wouldn't rely entirely on distant industrial supply chains to move their machines. A future where energy was tied to the land, the harvest, and local work. Then he vanished. On the 29th of September, 1913, Rudolph Diesel boarded a mail ship to England for important meetings regarding his engines. He had dinner, retired to his cabin, and the next day his bed was unused, his belongings neatly arranged. Days later, a body was found floating in the North Sea. Identification was impossible by conventional means, but the recovered objects pointed to Diesel. Newspapers ran two types of headlines: suicide or something darker. We may never know exactly what happened that night, but it remains unsettling. the man who invented one of history's most efficient machines and advocated for vegetable fuels, disappeared just as the industrial world committed fully to oil. After his disappearance, few in industry wanted to continue pushing vegetable oils. Oil companies filled the void, controlled distribution, reshaped the market, and within years, the engine designed for agricultural oils became tied to fossil fuel. The machine that could have liberated the farmer instead chained him to the gas station. Many wonder about diesel tractors, but what about gasoline cars, lawnmowers, chainsaws, everyday engines? That's where the second half of the story begins. This plant doesn't just produce one type of fuel. After harvesting the seeds for oil, the remaining stalks tons of fibrous, woody material per hectare contain cellulose. Through established biomass to sugar pathways, the stalks can be converted to fermentable sugars and then to ethanol fuel. One plant, two fuels, two engine families, almost no waste. Henry Ford enters the story here. Long before this became niche, Ford spoke about agricultural fuels. In 1908, the Model T was designed to run on gasoline, ethanol, or combinations of both. By 1925, Ford publicly declared that the fuel of the future would come from the fruits of weeds, any plant material capable of fermentation. He wasn't an eccentric, he was shaping modern industry. Ford understood a simple truth. If industry could get materials and energy from oil, it could get them from the land too. Farmers wouldn't just be buyers, they could become providers of industrial raw materials. In the 1930s, Ford pushed research around an idea called farm chemergy. The concept was straightforward: agriculture producing not only food but also materials, fuels, and industrial products. At Iron Mountain, Michigan, he tested biomass from various crops, including hemp, exploring practical industrial applications. Then in August 1941, he presented what seemed like a vision from the future: a car with panels made of cane, moss, wheat, straw, and flax, bonded with resin. Contemporary reports noted the impact. Ford struck a part of the car with an axe to demonstrate strength. The car was lighter than several contemporaries and was meant to run on plant-based fuel. The vision was compelling, a vehicle born from the land and powered by it. But by then, the battle was nearly lost. In 1937, 4 years earlier, the Marijuana Tax Act buried this knowledge for generations. The name mattered: not cannabis, not hemp, but marijuana. Harry Anslinger, first commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, knew why he used that term. If he had called it cannabis or hemp, farmers and medical professionals would recognize the plant immediately. By calling it marijuana, he separated the public's perception of a useful plant from a social threat. The language trick worked. Before taking office, Anslinger admitted that claims cannabis caused violence were absurd exaggerations. But after Prohibition ended in 1933, his bureaucracy needed a new justification for growth. Cannabis became the enemy. He wasn't alone. William Randolph Hearst owned newspapers, forests, and paper businesses. The hemp threatened his pulp industry. The DuPont family advanced petrochemical materials and wood processing industries. Hemp was in their way. Andrew Mellon, Secretary of the Treasury, was one of the richest men in the country, with ties to DuPont and a family connection to Anslinger. Standard Oil, the Rockefeller Empire, had obvious reasons to resist agricultural fuels with wide potential. No secret basement meetings needed financial incentives aligned. Fear-mongering newspapers, compliant officials, and industrial pressure eliminated alternatives. Hearst's papers published alarmist stories. He testified before Congress with shocking tales, lacking scientific basis. The American Medical Association objected. Dr. William Woodward declared the claims unsubstantiated. It didn't matter. The law advanced. That same year, 1937, 2,000 gas stations across the Midwest sold a fuel called Agrol. Real drivers used a gasoline-alcohol blend Indiana to South Dakota. It was a commercial network infrastructure already in place, not a lab experiment. Then the counterattack began. Administrators reported sabotage, market manipulation, and fierce hostility from oil sectors. Agricultural fuel was competing. Price differences with leaded gasoline were small, but the petroleum industry systematically blocked fiscal incentives that could have strengthened the network. The American Petroleum Institute publicly mocked alcohol fuel, calling it naive and unproductive. Between the mid-30s and decade's end, oil interests repeatedly stopped legislation supporting alcohol fuel blends. The Hyson, Kansas plant shut down, and the Agrol network collapsed. 2,000 stations vanished in less than 3 years. Think carefully. This wasn't an idea without opportunity. It existed, it worked, and it was crushed. Simultaneously, hemp was attacked by law in the same country, same pattern, same beneficiaries. Yet one community never forgot. The lesson isn't that everyone should become a fuel producer tomorrow. The lesson is that this plant was erased because it opened too many doors at once. Energy, materials, paper, fiber, oil, food, agricultural and industrial uses. That's why it was dangerous to a system built on dependency. Even with a house or a small property, this history matters. It shows technologies and crops capable of bringing energy production close to the land and the farmer, and that possibility was silenced. In 2010, Richard Parnas's team at the University of Connecticut studied hemp seed oil conversion to biodiesel. The result? 97%. Not 90, not 93, but 97%. That number proved the oil could efficiently convert to biodiesel, producing a final product that met recognized quality standards, performing exceptionally well in cold conditions compared to other biodiesels. Cold weather performance had long been a biodiesel objection. Hemp delivered surprising results. That 97% reveals a simple, powerful truth. With the plant, you're looking at a serious energy raw material. Ethanol works similarly. International experience shows ethanol blends have fueled millions of gasoline engines for decades. The real question is, who controls the raw material? Who controls infrastructure? And who profits from dependence? 1 hectare produces several hundred kilograms of grain. The oil from that grain can yield usable biodiesel. The same hectare produces over 2 metric tons of stalks, biomass sufficient for cellulosic ethanol. 1 harvest, 2 energy pathways. Scale up, and this is real partial autonomy. 2 hectares enter serious local use. 4 hectares touch partial energy self-sufficiency for a small farm. In Europe, some farmers embraced cooperative production of oilseed fuels for their trucks and tractors. Bringing energy close to the field was never ridiculous. What was absurd was pretending there was only one way to fuel an engine. This brings us to the document promised at the start. February 1938, Popular Mechanics ran an article, New Billion-Dollar Crop. It highlighted hemp, new machines processing stalks cheaply at industrial scale, textiles, paper, and agricultural and fuel products. It depicted hemp as capable of thousands of products and driving a new rural and industrial economy. 5 months after the Marijuana Tax Act passed, the article announced a $1 trillion crop to Americans, but the law had already condemned it. The message of the future arrived after the funeral, unnoticed by most. No explosions, no scandals needed. Law, language, and media direction ensured the majority never grasped what was being lost. 80 years passed before a 2018 law reopened the door, and even then, few noticed the historical potential returning. The Amish never needed the article to understand what lay before them. Their families had grown it since before the American Revolution. No television approval required. Simply, they remembered. Rudolph Diesel envisioned engines for vegetable oils, vanished before witnessing oil's domination. Henry Ford dreamed of cars made from and powered by the land. 2,000 Agrol stations sold plant fuel before being erased. A magazine announced a $1 billion crop after the law condemned it. Meanwhile, a silent community preserved the knowledge. You weren't meant to know this. Not the 97%, not the 2,000 stations, not that the diesel engine was originally independent of petroleum, not that one plant could influence energy, industry, materials, and agriculture. You were meant to drive to the gas station, watch prices rise, accept the only path, never question who decided it. But someone did, long ago, and answered with a seed. If you could plant 4 hectares of hemp this season, what would you fuel first? Your truck, your tractor, your generator, your home backup system? Think carefully.